You see this. You wouldn't read about it, but exactly the same thing appears to have just happened to Hyundai. And I don't think they're having all that much fun. Details next. So yesterday, at about the same time as ordinary folk were putting on their suits and ties to become corporate criminals for the next 8 or 10, 12 hours, whatever it takes these days for the kids, Hyundai in Australia issued a press release, which we'll get to in just a sec. And it strikes me that if EVs are the future, if EVs are to combustion cars kind of what combustion cars were to the horse and cart, then why do they lurch from one disaster to another so repeatedly, so predictably? Anyway, the headline is, how do you feel about $35,000 off the next EV that you might buy? No questions asked, dude. Like, obviously there's a catch, but take 35 grand off. We're making so much money selling EVs to the public, and demand is so strong and outstripping supply that we just don't need the profit. So take 35 grand off, dude. Said no car company ever. This video is possible because of my two enduring side hustles, which are, as you know by now, if you are a regular viewer, I get new cars cheap for dudes and dudettes just like you. Mainstream Australians who want mainstream Australian cars. What we do is we do all of the negotiating for you so that you don't have to stand on a killing floor and get gutted by a car salesman who does this every day, and you only do it once every 3 to 5 years. So imbalance of power there inherently, I'd suggest. So if you don't want to experience that, the knife in between the ribs while you're grabbing your ankles, humming Moon River again, then we can help with that. You just fill in the contact form down there, click that link, fill in that form. It's obligation free, and most people save thousands compared with the recommended drive-away price of the car. Oh, their dreams. So there's that. Part 2 is I get home solar for people in a similar way. We just sidestep all the sharks and the shonks, dude, and put together a system that is bespoke for your premises, like carefully designed with engineering sign-off, using quality components and non-cowboy installers. We tick every box like that. There's local support for all of these products. You don't have to engage with a chatbot in Shanghai. If anything goes wrong, we can sort it out for you here and now, and most people get a pretty good deal on that as well. And if you want a battery, dude, Albo and Mr. Bowen, my two favourite politicians in the whole universe, have opened the purse strings and they've decided to incentivise home batteries. So most people get thousands of dollars back, and my team even handles all of that for you. You don't need to do the research for yourself and figure out which forms to fill in. It just all happens in the background, and you can take thousands of bucks off a battery. This would be a battery in a brand new installation, or a battery for an existing solar installation, or it could even be a brand new battery in an existing solar and battery installation. So if you want more battery so that you can run your house on photons that you've harvested during the day and converted to electrons and stored as chemical energy in a box next to your house, and then you can be sort of off grid for much, if not all of the evening/night, then now is a perfect storm, because the government is just throwing thousands at people who want to do that. Contact form down there as well. It's a different form, different link. Just there's 2 links in the description, dude. Click the right one, fill it in, no obligation. We'll do what we can. And if we can't help you, then we'll tell you about that as well. And now the perfect storm of electrons orbiting this latest EV fiasco in a news domain beset on all sides, seemingly, by EV fiascos. One of Hyundai's leading PR minions reached out to me by email and suggested that I might be interested in the following news release. He said, quote, "Dear all, please find below Hyundai's new Q4 drive-away pricing offers on EVs, brackets, national offer. Savings are based on New South Shittsville registration." Now, there are 8 different vehicles lined up here in the table that you can see before you, I'm sure, so I'll just run through that. The last 3 are just the creme de la creme of discount de la discount, but there is a catch on the last 3. We'll get to that. Okay, Kona Electric, which is not a bad bus, standard range, drive-away pricing, $49,990, which is a saving of almost $9,200. Like, who can do that? Who can say, bugger it, just take nearly 9 and a bit grand off? Come on, if it's all going so well. Ioniq 5, standard range, $65,990, take almost 10 grand off, dude. That's the price with the almost 10 grand off. $65,990 with 10 grand off nearly. Insta standard range and Insta extended range, $39,990 and $42,990 respectively, which is early 3s or late 3s off, depending on you and which one you want, dude. Instacross, same sort of thing, 3.5 off for $45,990. That's the funky one with the roof basket that slashes the range by, I don't know, thousands of kilometres or something. Now, the 3 that I really want to talk about here that are super interesting to me is Ioniq 6, okay? So there's the Dynamic, the Technic, and the Epic, EPIQ, in order of poverty to least poverty, from $49,990 to $59,990, and the savings there ranging from $27,600 nearly, $27,600 to $34 and a bit, depending on which spec level you want. That's, to me, that's amazing. But the catch is, obviously, you can see there in the print, the fine print, they're model year 23. So given that if you mint a car today on the production line, it's going to be a model year 26 car because that's how the car industry rolls, these unbeatable discounts are for 3-year-old, allegedly brand new cars. Now, do you really want one? Do you really want to be that guy who rolled the dice in, I don't know, bought one in 2023 when it was quote unquote brand new and paid nearly the full freight for it, and you see this happen to your resale value? That's pretty amazing to me too. So this, not just the Ioniq 6 issue here, which is gobsmacking to me, that there are 3-year-old brand new Ioniq 6s somewhere out in the holding yard on ice nationally waiting to be snapped up by you for 30 to 30 and a bit thousand bucks off broadly. It just highlights to me how the wonder bra of electric vehicles is playing out around us, because when it comes to the objective driving experience of electric cars, and I've driven, I don't know, dozens of different electric cars by now. I sat in the same first model Kona Electric for a year and experienced that, and I really like driving electric cars. I like it. They're good to drive. They're fun to drive. There's something quite addictive about the way they just seamlessly put the power down quickly. They're never in the wrong gear because, dude, there's only one gear, and they seem to have just this instant application of torque, you know? And then if you can get the tyre spec right so that they're not skating around on eco tyres to sort of eke out the last couple of Ks out of the range, if you put some nice grippy tyres on them, all of a sudden you've got a really cool dynamics package. However, there are some problems, right? Like, it's pretty brave to issue a press release to this effect because you are, in a sense, pulling your pants down about how the sales plans of recent years just haven't worked out the way you wanted them to, and we can't afford to have, you know, millions upon millions of dollars worth of these vehicles just rotting in a lot somewhere. We have to get rid of them. That's what this looks like, okay? It's looking like that. It's smelling like that. It's quacking like that. And they've had to step in it, right? And issue a press release that publicly, it's tantamount to admitting that we can't sell it kind of problem, especially with the Ioniq 6, which is not a bad thing. I've only ever driven one of those briefly, but it's a really nice thing to drive. It looks like a cockroach, and that's probably what's holding it back. And it's up against Ioniq 5, and there's not enough differentiation between them in my mind to make you step away from a really pleasing aesthetic, that Game Boy aesthetic of the Ioniq 5, to jump into an Ioniq 6. But dude, for $35,000 off, maybe you change that. But I'd so want to know, how does the battery health go when you put a brand new EV on ice for 3 years and you just don't use it? What does that do to the battery, which, let's not forget, is the single most expensive component of any EV? I'd want a rock solid guarantee about that. And do we care about the resale value? Probably not. But if you're an existing customer and you paid heaps more than that, how do you feel about this? Because that might just tarnish your enthusiasm for the brand into the future. So this is like playing with fire if you're a car company. I'd suggest it doesn't scream commercial success. It doesn't say that we predicted the market and it's selling they're all selling their tits off and we're so happy that we just wanted to give some money back. Car companies don't say that. They don't do that. Discounting of this nature is a desperation move, always. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I've never seen discounts of this nature that weren't desperation moves or edicts from above, from overseas, to start getting some cash. Like, the full freight would be better, but some cash is better than none, because these are high capital cost assets. They're just sitting there, right? That's what this says. It screams that demand is inadequate to meet supply generally about EVs. The industry finally caught up, and everyone who wanted an EV initially has kind of got one, and then selling EVs to mainstream punters who aren't capital E, capital V evangelists, that's much harder than selling EVs to those early adopters who've always wanted to take the fight to big oil kind of thing and make a stand in our battery-powered car kind of. That's. I guess I'm being a little theatrical about that, but that's kind of where the market is, right? People who really, really wanted one and really, really needed to make a statement with an EV, statistically, those people already have one. And selling EVs, I think, to everyone else is a little bit more difficult. Not enough people currently want them. That's the problem. That's the problem when you want to roll out things like net zero, which we'll get to at the moment. And the sales the way they are and supply outstripping demand is in spite of massive government incentivization, which would be the zero FBT deal, like fringe benefits tax, zero, on EVs if you buy them under, or if you own one, or if you use one is a better way of putting it, under a novated lease. Now, to do that, you have to be a salaried employee, okay? Novated leases are only available to salaried employees. But this is massive incentivization that's operating way over budget at the moment, and yet EV sales are imbalanced. The supply is much greater than the demand, as this press release from Hyundai kind of indicates. And I really don't think the styling of Ioniq 6 did it any favours, even though it is very aerodynamically efficient. Now, this is kind of a problem if you're an official entity and you've sucked on the net zero Kool-Aid, and that would be because you might have seen this story recently, but according to the Climate Change Authority, which is a kind of useless artificial official advisory body, I guess you'd call them. It was just magicked into existence in 2011 by a piece of legislation which was called the Climate Change Authority Act of 2011. The government just made up this piece of legislation, and the Climate Change Authority sprung into existence. It's part of the bureaucracy, and it was legitimised and forced to exist by virtue of some brand new legislation. And its only function is to advise the government. Technically, it operates at arm's length. It's not a regulator. It just provides advice to regulators and politicians, all right? Because according to them, roughly half of roughly half of all car sales need to be EVs from now until 2035 if the government is to meet its target of 62 to whatever it was, 70% reduction in emissions by 2035. So that's a problem because EVs are currently between 7 and 8% of sales. And for this whole freak show of net zero to work, they just need to magic themselves up to 50% of sales, which is a 700% increase in sales. And because EVs are limited by demand and not supply currently, that means that there needs to be 7 times the number of consumers who actually want to buy EVs or who think that they will buy them because suddenly they're just, unbelievably good value. And this means that we've got a huge problem, right? Because if we've got massive government incentivization already, then how do we magic up the demand? How do we do that? This is the domain of Mandrake or frickin' Harry Potter. It really is. We're properly in that domain. It means 7 times more people need to think the time is right to electrify their transportation. And that demand, that desire has to be maintained for the next 10 years in order just to get this planned reduction out of the blocks. And I mean, obviously we'll have a different government at that time and they can attribute the blame for non-achievement onto their predecessors, which they always do. But in the meantime, we have to suffer through this, frankly, insufferable rhetoric, right? Even if such a feat of astounding alchemy were possible, how the fuck do we charge all of these additional EVs, right? Because the people, as I see it, who are most receptive to this message about buy an EV, it makes sense. They're inner city dwellers. They often live in apartments and they don't have off-street parking, right? So how the fuck are they going to charge their EVs? We don't have the infrastructure for that. So we've got plenty of vehicles. We've established that. And you can get them for up to $35,000 off if you want, provided you don't mind buying a quote-unquote brand new 3-year-old car. That's possible. But how do we charge them? Where's the infrastructure for that? Because if you are reliant wholly on public charging infrastructure, that is an epic shit show of underdone-edness at the moment. It really is. And I would suggest that, according to recent news reports at least, that this is not a uniquely Australian problem, dude. It's just not. Apparently, it's the Germans and the ITAIs are catching on because, according to Politico in a recent report, Germany and the ITAIs have jointly urged in a letter to the EU Commission to amend the EU's 2035 ban on new CO2 emitting cars. See, the EU government, if you like, has this ban on combustion cars. Like, no new combustion cars can be sold in the EU after 2035 currently. That's the policy, at least. But the Germans and the ITAIs have teamed up and said, no can do, dudes, right? They're calling for a, quote, change of course in automotive policy. That's according to the Italian industry minister from the 6th of October, so about a week ago now, kind of thing, you know. The move, coordinated by the Italian Prime Minister and backed by the German Chancellor, marks a united front, according to Politico, against the phase-out of ICE vehicles and surprised the coalition partners because the coalition government in Germany at the moment, so the lefties, which control environmental policy, are at odds with the righties who control the financial sort of economic policy of Germany. And Germany, let us not forget, is a car-making powerhouse. If you're a car maker in Germany, that's like being a gas company or a coal miner in Australia, right? You really are pulling the levers of the nation's economy, and therefore you are taken extremely seriously by regulators. But anyway, the lefties and the righties in the coalition in Germany are at odds over this, and they've just had the most epic spat over this letter because the lefties didn't approve it and they don't agree, right? So there is some pushback governmentally, and it's a complete shit show for the Chancellor of Germany, like we all care. But the German Environmental Ministry spokesperson stated the federal government's still coordinating its position here, despite sending a letter strenuously objecting to it and urging for a change of course to the European government. So they're not all on board on cancelling combustion cars and going all EV in the EU, if that's enough freaking acronyms for anyone. Now, let us hop over the Atlantic, shall we, and go to America, because in America, everyone who can walk away in a dignified way is walking away as fast as they can do from EVs, at least with their dignity intact, right? They're just backpedaling at 1,000 miles an hour because it's the same shit show in America. Meaning that the market, which would be buyers of actual vehicles like you and me, they don't want EVs in the quantity that all the former capital E, capital V evangelists have bought into the process to appease Orangutan 6's predecessor, right? On the other side of politics. The greenies, the lefties, they all wanted net zero, and then all the companies, like all the big three American automakers, they all went all in on electrification. And then Orange Man 6 took over and they're all walking away. Even Electric Jesus finds himself hilariously in this position following his divorce from Orange Man. He's essentially, this is incredible to me too, like he is viewed as the messiah, and he's on the record telling everyone how fucking smart he is at every press conference, knows more about manufacturing than anyone currently alive on Earth, unquote, if you believe his bullshit, okay? He's essentially burnt $10 billion building the Cybertruck Mausoleum. That's what it is, right? Previously thought of as a production line for the future of pickups or whatever, but currently little more than a mausoleum for the Cybertruck, right? Of all the EVs that people really don't want, the Cybertruck is number one with a frickin' bullet, right? Now, these are facts, and if you're an EV evangelist, you don't have to like this, but I love it when promises get held up to scrutiny following the passage of time. Now, the Cybertruck was promised in 2021, okay? Actually delivered, can you guess? First delivered 2023, so 2 years late. It was promised starting at $40,000 American, but actually offered for $61,000 greenbacks. So more than 50% out there, I'd suggest. It was promised with a range of 500 miles, but the best it ever did, officially, depending on the variant, but the best variant delivered 340 miles. So that's out by a lazy 33% as well, isn't it? And not in a frickin' good way, like all the other deltas between promises and actual deliverables, right? What actually got delivered? Electric Jesus promised $250,000 a year with the potential to ramp up to $500,000 because obviously with those millions of pre-orders, demand was going to be unlimited, right? That was essentially the promise. Okay, and I'm not talking about just the theatrical missteps here. I'm talking about these business fundamentals, right? What actually got delivered? 250,000 was the promise. What actually got delivered in total right, by early 2025 was 46,000. That's 2 years worth of deliveries. Should have been 500,000 in 2 years. Actually, slightly less than 50,000. So roughly running at 1/10 of capacity. The Q2 production for 2025 is in the low thousands because they've got to keep stopping the production line because they've got a mountain of freaking cyber trucks out the back that nobody wants in various holding yards. And if Hyundai Australia thinks it's got something of a problem getting rid of 3-year-old Ioniq 6s for $35,000 off, I'd suggest walk a mile in electric Jesus' shoes, dudes, because it's unsurmountable. Like, that production line is, if you're lucky, currently running at about 10% capacity. And as anyone who knows anything about production engineering, particularly as it pertains to production at scale, like mass production, if you're running a production line at anything other than about 95% capacity, you're going out the back door. And 10% is just a license to burn money because you've got this intense investment in capital equipment that's all revved up and going nowhere. It's just digging a big hole in the road and throwing money into it and pouring, ironically enough, gasoline on top and incinerating that cash. They can't make anymore because it won't fit into storage and they can't sell them anyway. So I'd suggest that when you see this and all of the other stories about Ford ramping back its production and Volkswagen being all in on electrification and yet, in practice, walking away from it as fast as they can without their partners in the EU actually seeing them do that. When you see this happening so many times, so many levels, we need to at least get a little bit smarter about it, don't we? I think we do. The developed world needs to show some leadership here. And I'd suggest, I've made a list of things that we need to do, right? We need to drop the maniacal ideological obsession with net zero. I mean, we need to embrace something else instead. And the thing that we need to embrace instead, the alternative, is greater efficiency for society, but not evangelical, ideological, sort of non-evidence-based embracement of anything. Efficiency works, right? We could, what would we call it? Perhaps there should be a marketing campaign about this. We could give it a catchy name. We could make Australia less shit simply by concentrating on efficiency. Instead of this fantasy, this ideological fantasy of net zero, we could just make the joint more efficient. That's not that hard. And you know what? It's also achievable. Unlike net zero. Okay, so we've got net zero and efficiency. So let's do a quick comparison, shall we? Because unlike net zero, greater efficiency is possible. Like, it's feasible. It's doable. You know, we know how to do this. We don't need to develop new, exciting sodium batteries, which might not be production ready and at scale for 10 years or 15 years or something. We can make society more efficient now. You know, we can make society more efficient in Australia by just making public transport less shit and free. And if we did that, more cars would stay at home, wouldn't they? That'd be one way of reducing fuel consumption, which is all that electric vehicles are about, as I see it. And yet we could do that. We could do that in a heartbeat, and it would cost less than the fucking incentivization of EVs, right? Just make public transport free and make it not shit. Invest a bit in that instead. Unlike net zero, greater efficiency is scientifically defensible. You could have a debate about that and say, well, here's our plan for greater efficiency and here's how much it would save us and here's how much it would save on emissions, because it would do both things, whereas net zero can't do both things. It can only do one thing badly. Unlike net zero, greater efficiency won't be sending our society, our nation broke. There's that. won't take us any further down the track of turning into more of a third world shithole than we already are. This is why we can't make Australia great again. We have to make Australia less shit, right? That's all we can hope for at this point. You know, when I started pointing this out, and I got an email from, or a push message, whatever it was, from YouTube a few days ago, it was very confronting. It said, "Congratulations, dude, your channel is 15 years old." And I went, fuck me dead, you know, like I've been doing this for roughly a quarter of my life now. And when I started making jokes about Australia being a bit shit, people would take me on in the comments. They would say, "Best damn country on earth. If you don't like it, why don't you just leave?" kind of thing. And you know what? In the intervening 15 years when my face dropped and I turned into my father aesthetically, etc., people stopped calling me out on how shit Australia had become because more people could see it. And statistically, I think everyone agrees after ScoMo and after COVID and how we fucked that up so royally, like every other developed country, after all of that bullshit, nobody takes me on and says, "Australia's not shit, the best damn country on earth, dude." No one says that. Everyone goes, All we can hope for is make it less shit. So where were we? I'd suggest let us make Australia less shit by doing only possible things and by doing them incrementally in a measured, well-considered way underpinned by the facts. And certainly we should have debates enthusiastically and energetically about this, but we shouldn't do it the way the media does it. We shouldn't do it by having a host in the middle and two clowns shouting at each other in opposition on other sides. We should respect each other and debate the facts. And that's going to be pretty and hard at the moment because we have to start with an agreed set of facts. And on my world, the agreed facts are that climate change is quite real and it's definitely of concern. It's definitely caused by the human emissions of CO2. That's not up for grabs. These are facts. What is up for grabs is what do we do about it? So let's not be calling people deniers or any of that stuff if they say that perhaps net zero is not the way to do this. Let's just hear rational arguments about it, right? We should do this in this way because here's a couple of unpalatable facts for you net zero zealot idiots, okay? Number one, we are the world's largest exporter of coal, and that is not about to change, okay? We are the world's number 2 exporter of liquefied natural gas, and that's by a B's endophallus, dude. It's a photo finish. Number 1 to our number 2 is Qatar. We are the number 1 exporter in the world of iron ore, and we are the number 2 freaking exporter of bauxite, which is, of course, the raw material you need if you want to make aluminium. So if you combine these 4 ingredients, and we're pretty big on other resources as well, but let's just concentrate on these: coal, natural gas, iron ore, aluminium. Show me the product that our society, that our civilization can do without, you know? Can we do without thermal coal for electricity? No. Our society, our civilization would stop without that. Can we do without the metallurgical coal for steel? No, definitely not. Natural gas, same thing. Civilization collapses without natural gas and coal. We can't do without iron ore, and we can't make iron ore into steel without hydrocarbon resources. We just fucking can't. There are green steel pilot programs, but they do not scale to the level that society/civilization needs. And we can't do without aluminium as well. And I'd put a whole bunch of other metals in that category, like, I don't know, copper, etc. How do we have an advanced civilization and enjoy the standard of living that we enjoy? You don't get medical care, you don't get supermarkets full of all of the shit that we need without all of these things. We don't do it. But what we do is we send this stuff overseas, right? Endless CO2 is emitted overseas on our behalf by other nations, producing this shit that we really need, making it into, I don't know, fucking everything that our society depends upon to function, right? This is what we do. We slut it out. We just do. And we allow Mr. Sleazy and brain fart Bowen to convince us that, delude us is probably a better word, into thinking that this is somehow a pathway to reducing the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere on a planetary scale. To me, that's just an epic cake of bullshit right there, okay? Sending your emissions offshore is not the same thing as reducing emissions. It's just not. And why do we buy into this? Why do people believe this? Do we believe it because they went to a meeting in fucking Kyoto or Paris or something, and they went with a whole bunch of other people who are more important than us and who therefore understand shit better than us because they're just simply more important and more privy to, you know, high-level stuff than us? This is not a basis for the ongoing survival and or prosperity of humanity, at least not in my book. And the way we play this game is fucking nuts, dude. It just is. It's going to send us further down the S-bend if we proceed in this ideological, zealot-driven way, this path, this S-shaped path to the deep ocean outfall where we can swim with net zero. I would argue that we need to make Australia less shit, and we need to do it urgently.